the headquarters of a major corporation with an annual turnover of 300 billion yen, taking note of its glass walls and lush greenery within. He expects nothing less from such an important office, believing an office's entrance to be crucial in setting the company's image. Much like the entrance of a house, the way it is organized reflects the sincerity of its residents. Tsukasa Amashiki is a job hopper who has walked through the entrances of numerous companies. Smartly dressed, he has come to this company for his final interview. Job hopping usually refers to changing jobs frequently, but in his case he does it for better treatment and to hone his skills, since he is always aiming for greater heights. He has worked for several major companies, but the skills he can gain with them are becoming limited, so he is now aiming for this big corporation. Standing before a mirror, he adjusts his hair and checks his sales smile, pleased with what he sees. After overcoming numerous evaluations, he has finally reached the final interview. The screening process was tough and many did not make it. All that's left is for him to get through this final interview and the job change will be complete. And though he can anticipate some of the questions the interviewers may ask, he knows that not everything will go as planned. As the receptionist signals him to enter the interview room, Amashiki confidently gets up, reassuring himself. He knows he's built up enough career experience to manage this, and is certain that his skills will surely be applicable even in a big corporation. Determined, the young job changer opens the door, only to find himself alone on a sprawling meadow. Confused, he believes he must have entered the wrong room, and is seeing the greenery some major corporations incorporate into their workspaces to provide relaxation for their employees. Noting his own absent-mindedness and entering another room by mistake, he turns to open the door and return to the waiting room. Only, he sees more open space behind him. He calmly remarks he has found himself in an unknown place, but soon suffers a breakdown as he grasps his head in desperation, wondering where he is and what happened to his final interview. Sensing his skin to be unusually smooth, he takes a selfie and realizes he has been aged down to how he looked when he was 18. As old habits die hard, he immediately considers this to be a great advantage in his professional career, since having an 18-year-old with his level of experience would be any company's wet dream. But he snaps back to reality and realizes now is not the time to think like that. He wonders if such a place exists in Japan, or if he is even there at all, examining his surroundings only to discover never-before-seen plants and creatures. It is then the realization sinks in. He has just been isekai'd. He recognizes the trope from the games and anime he watched in Japan, so his conclusion seems natural. Feeling his breast pocket, he finds a plate that, when activated, acts as a status window. Examining its content, he's amazed at being able to see his abilities reflected in numbers, realizing he has exceptional magic power, but his physical stats are lacking, since he only exercised for health during his life as a salaryman. He grows curious when he sees his profession is listed as job changer, and upon clicking that tab, he learns that he can change to any of the numerous professions in that world, all at the cost of consuming some MP. Several questions speed through Amashiki's head. Was this profession unique to him due to his history of job changes? How did the interview venue connect to another world? He briefly considers waiting to see if the other interviewees appear or if a guide shows up, but he quickly decides against it, knowing it will all be over once his water runs out, and he cannot just cling to that only clue. He cannot just stay there, and being passive is not in his nature, being the sort that believes everything will work out when you have a positive mindset. That go-getter attitude comes crashing down when he runs straight into a huge, praying mantis monster, as it begins chasing him around the second it spots him. His strategy having backfired spectacularly, Amashiki is unable to outrun the creature no matter how hard he tries. Changing tactics, he turns around at the foot of a tall tree and faces off the creature, trying to talk himself out of his predicament. But he is barely able to dodge the mantis's attack as it slices the tree behind him and sends it crashing to the ground. Observing the destruction, Amashiki grimly realizes there is no room for negotiations with the creature. As it looms menacingly above him, he realizes he will perish if he just sits still, and frantically wonders what he can do to save himself. He briefly considers looking for a weapon, before he remembers the power of job changing that he has within him. Desperately pulling out his status plate, he activates it, screaming for a job change, and choosing the profession of sorcerer. He is immediately surrounded by the arcane symbols that make up the magic of this world, as a new power begins to flow within him. The knowledge and techniques of being a sorcerer automatically flow into him, and now he naturally understands how to use magic. In a rush of confidence and desperation, He raises his hand and activates a magic circle, launching a fireball straight at the incoming mantis. The creature is caught completely off guard by this, being instantly consumed by the flames and turned to a pile of ash, as Amashiki watches on in utter shock. Still processing what just happened, he pumps his fist in triumph and looks at his hands in confusion. As soon as he changed jobs, he was able to use magic. Was this the power of a job changer? He is pulled from his thoughts by upbeat music that begins playing out of nowhere, which he soon finds out to be a sign that he has leveled up after defeating the monster. Checking his status window, he realizes the world is just like a game. Staring at the pile of ash, however, he notes that only its system resembles one, since he can still feel the heat of magic and was nearly beheaded earlier. Amashiki comes to the realization that he will die if he takes this world as a game and treats it lightly. This is no joke, he screams, as he looks at the sky and declares that he has built up a career working for bigger companies for a better life. He then pauses, pointing out that his career was meant for climbing up the corporate world in modern Japan, and wondering if it will still prove useful in a world overrun with monsters and magic. Coming to the conclusion that all the effort he has made thus far in life has been rendered useless, the disheartened young man falls to his knees, the once rising corporate star now reduced to a level 2 human in an alien world. Gritting his teeth, he resolves that he must now build a career from scratch using the power of a job changer to become any profession he wishes. His earlier experience fighting the mantis clearly showed how significant the power of professions is in this other world. So it is only logical that if he is able to raise the levels of numerous professions, then he can prove his strength anywhere. Having made up his mind, Amashiki gets up with determination, having resolved to master all jobs in this world. Sitting by the shade of some trees, Amashiki summons a water ball out of thin air in the palm of his hand using his sorcerer's powers. Thanks to magic, he no longer must worry about running out of water, so he moves on to other issues. The presence of monsters makes camping a no-go for the time being, and the basics of living such as food, clothing, and shelter are still a necessity. Determined to find a settlement, he considers changing jobs once again to a profession that might be useful for the current situation. Opening the status window, he sees he has spent 20 MP for the job change, 10 for the fireball he used in the fight with the mantis, and quite a bit more for the water spell. Since MP is slowly recovering due to the sorcerer's passive skill, he concludes there's no need to be stingy with the job changes, and begins to browse the professions list until he finds a suitable one. As soon as he chooses the hunter profession, his senses become inhumanly sharper, making it easy for him to detect anomalies in nature. He uses his heightened sense of smell, sight, and hearing until he finds the faint traces of human footprints on the grass, as well as blood stains on the underside of some leaves. The blood has almost been absorbed into the ground, indicating it was shed about 2 days earlier, and the footprints of humans and wolf-like creatures seem to indicate a hunt or a battle took place there. Either way, he concludes that he should be able to find a settlement if he follows the footprints. Picking up his briefcase, he eagerly sets on his way, pushing through the thick vegetation until he finds himself before a fortified village in a clearing. Amashiki is relieved at this, not minding if it is a small village rather than the town he was hoping to find. Seeing residents moving about, he cannot believe how happy he is to meet people again, and having no need to look for any more traces in the forest, he switches back to being a sorcerer. A young boy with a headband guards the entrance of the town, armed with a crude spear. Straightening his tie, Amashiki approaches him with his best business smile, surprised to be only getting strange looks in return. Noting his odd attire, the guard asks who he is. Realizing his appearance to be the reason for the boy's wariness, the young job changer gets straight to the point, stating his name and introducing himself as a wandering sorcerer. The boy doesn't believe him, telling Amashiki there is no way a job holder would come to such a remote place, and asking the confused young man to show him his status plate as proof. Pulling it from his breast pocket, Amashiki solemnly presents it to the guard, who is both shocked to see he was telling the truth and confused at the strange way he had of showing the plate to him. Apologizing for his mistrust, he explains that job holders are usually under the employ of the country or its nobles, or they head to the big towns to work as adventurers, so they are seldom seen in remote places like the village. Amashiki realizes that much like in Japan or any other place, people in this other world move to places where they can best use their abilities and have higher earnings, so the boy's skepticism is natural. Twisting the truth a bit, he confidently declares that he has been honing his magic in the mountains, and thought he would like to experience village life for a change. quietly omitting the fact he had only been there since this morning and was desperately searching for civilization. The young guard buys his answer, noting it would explain his unfamiliarity with common sense. Amashiki is somewhat annoyed at being branded as someone lacking common sense, but is snapped from his thoughts when the boy addresses him, stating that he has a request from a job holder like himself, and the young man tells him he can call him Tsukasa. The boy then asks him to follow him to the village chief's house, where they will talk in detail. They soon reach the house, which sits on a small hill at the center of the village, and the young guard eagerly barges in, asking to speak with the chief. The elderly man addresses him as Zozo, seemingly bursting with joy when he hears that a job holder has come to the village, with Tsukasa finding their excitement to be somewhat odd. Composing himself, the village chief apologizes, and states his name to be Esta, finding it odd when Tsukasa presents his status plate to him with reverence, while asking about the request Zozo mentioned. Growing serious, Esta reveals that a monster called a Silver Wolf has appeared near their village, thus confirming Tsukasa's suspicion that the traces he saw earlier were from a monster attack. Though the village can handle a few monsters, dealing with a whole pack poses quite a challenge, so they were hoping that a job holder like him could get rid of the wolves for them. Zozo then tells him there are no other job holders in the village, since everyone else there is just a villager, making Tsukasa realize just how rare job holders are. He then reasons that the constant threat of monsters means the risk may be high, but there is always demand for combat-ready jobs. According to Esta and Zozo, silver wolves are fast-moving, keen-smelling, wolf-like creatures with sharp fangs and claws and silver fur, being ranked E by the Adventurers Guild, the second lowest power level. Though even a few villagers can take one of them down, Esta's village is quite small, and everyone must work to maintain their livelihood, so if they were to go hunting and one of them got injured, it would have dire consequences. Plus, some must always remain behind to guard the village. Tsukasa is upset at how the monsters are disrupting the operation of the village, and his ears begin to tingle when the village chief begs him to take on the task and offers to pay him generously for it. He had already fought monsters without the benefit of a job change before, and besides, he has decided to aim for career advancement in this world, and will do everything he thinks will benefit him. Standing confidently, he pounds his chest and agrees to take the job. Esta and Zozo immediately shower him with praise at this, despite him not having completed the task at all. He sees them as simple, but since he knows nothing about the world, nor does he have coin nor a place to live, he will have to rely on them for a while. So he reasons it is best to do them a favor. Without further ado, he is about to embark on his quest, only to be interrupted by his rumbling stomach. Somewhat embarrassed, he asks for something to eat before starting the hunt, and the two villagers look at each other in disbelief at the fact that he doesn't have food with him either. Soon enough, Tsukasa has been fed and equipped with far more practical, if tight-fitting, adventure clothes for his quest, and despite feeling like a cosplayer, he sets down to track down the silver wolves. Back in the forest, he notes that the plants there are like nothing he ever saw, and thus wonders if they're edible. He then checks the job list, eventually finding that of an appraiser, a profession allowing people to determine the value of anything and check people's status, with the information provided varying according to level difference. Using his new profession, Tsukasa scans an herb and realizes it has medicinal properties, deciding to harvest some to sell at a profit, and maybe use the apothecary and alchemist jobs to make his own medicines and potions in the future, being excited by the prospect. The skill also allows him to discern a nearly identical yet poisonous plant, which he would have otherwise mixed up, making him extremely grateful to be able to get accurate information in a world without internet. He considers switching jobs every time he needs something to be a hassle, but notes that in games one can level up and then switch to a different job or a higher profession without losing the previous skills. This seems to be the case with him as well, since he still remembers the knowledge and methods he had as a sorcerer and the skills are carried over. To try this, he tries firing a stone lance from the tip of his finger, and much to his surprise, he succeeds. Though the projectile is much smaller than he thought it would be, he is terrified by the sheer destruction it causes once fired, and is shocked to find himself falling to his knees after feeling a huge drop in his magical power. Opening his status window, he confirms that he spent 50 MP on a single spell, proving that using magic as a non-sorcerer is extremely cost-inefficient. As he recovers laying on the ground, he notes that using skills suited to one's profession is the most efficient system, which makes sense considering the points system. This is a significant discovery, since the combination of sorcery and swordsmanship would be extremely powerful in combat, while combining sorcery with the non-combat professions such as appraiser would be perfect for surprise attacks. This is worth it despite the huge MP consumption, but he knows he needs to increase his level and thus his amount of MP. Suddenly, Tsukasa's hunter senses kick in as he feels the faint smell of a beast in the air, taking cover behind some bushes as 3 ferocious silver wolves appear. Checking their stats, he sees that despite their high agility, he is still above them, so he could escape if needed. Confident in his skills, he switches to Sorcerer and proceeds to create 3 stone lances, firing them at the wolves from behind cover. Taken completely by surprise, 2 beasts perish instantly, but Tsukasa misses the shot on the last one and only injures its shoulder. Enraged, the surviving wolf turns to face him and charges, opening its jaws to reveal rows of sharp fangs. In desperation, Tsukasa summons one final stone lance, aiming at the approaching monster at point-blank range. He closes his eyes, and the stone projectile successfully obliterates the creature at the last moment. Still shocked, Tsukasa approaches the carcass and pokes it with his finger to make sure it is dead, sighing with relief and falling back when the creature does not stir. He then hears the annoying upbeat music that signals he is leveled up again, checking his status window and pumping his fist when he realizes he is leveled up, raising his base stats and maximum MP. Sensing the other members of the pack gathering nearby, he considers adopting a strategy of repeatedly changing jobs to face them, grinning eerily as he declares that he will make the monsters the stepping stones of his career. When Tsukasa left the village for the hunt, Zozo had told him that silver wolf fangs serve as proof of his victory, telling him to collect them. Having done so, he examines the slain creature, taking note of the determination it showed when trying to end him, a life-and-death struggle that would be unthinkable in peaceful modern-day Japan. Having learned from this experience, he knows he must master the art of job changing if he is to survive here. Besides, there is something else on his mind. During his last level up, he noticed that his stats are increasing, most notably his MP and intelligence. He believes this is due to having defeated the monster as a sorcerer, and that different stats would have increased if he had used a sword. The investigation into this matter is put on hold, however, as Tsukasa senses monsters approaching. Numerous silver wolves emerge from amongst the bushes, and unlike the previous 3, these are alert to his presence and are out for blood. Realizing he had been dealing with a mere scouting party before, he faces the snarling creatures and uses his sorcerer's powers to create 8 stone lances. The projectiles make short work of 4 of the wolves, having their strength, but the survivors continue their charge with speed and ferocity. He attacks again, barely scratching them, but as a carcass falls next to him, he realizes the lance is pierced through, probably because his magic power has increased. His excitement at this is short-lived, as the surviving silver wolves continue charging past their fallen brethren and pounce on him. Grimly, Tsukasa realizes he won't be able to cast magic in time at that distance, so he quickly changes jobs and becomes a swordsman, unsheathing the blade the villagers provided and slicing the head of the first wolf with one clean strike. Spinning the sword above his head, he proceeds to deal with the sole remaining wolf. He can feel the power surging through his arms, not to mention that the monster's movements seem like slow motion to him now. This is what it's like to be a swordsman. Having slain the last creature, Tsukasa sheathes his sword and stands amidst the carnage, suddenly being alerted by the upbeat music that lets him know once again he has leveled up. Just as he thought, slaying the last wolves while being a swordsman caused his strength and agility to improve greatly. This confirms that each job influences different stat increases, meaning he can somewhat control which stats he enhances by switching between jobs. This is a great discovery, and the job changer makes a note to experiment more with this once he decides on a direction for his stats. Before getting underway, time passes, and the only thing breaking the silence of the forest is the cawing of a flock of birds taking flight. Alerted by this, Tsukasa reaches for his sword, but nothing comes out of it. Almost an hour after fighting the large wolf pack, he has not seen any new monsters around. He considers it would be unwise to venture deeper into the forest and risk drawing the attention of the rest of the pack. Having already slain 13 silver wolves, it is safe for him to assume that he has thinned out the pack, and he has a bag full of fangs to prove it, so he turns to head back to the village. On his way back, he returns to the spot where he fought the silver wolves earlier. He examines a wolf carcass, having erroneously believed it would have been immediately devoured. Looking at it now, he takes a notice of the fur's surprisingly good condition, and remembering that Zozo told him that the fangs are proof of their defeat, he wonders what the other parts could be used for. Changing jobs to appraiser, he uses his skill to find out the wolf pelt is soft and warm, being suitable for clothing and blankets. While its meat is somewhat tough but full of flavor. Glad that there's use for it after all, he resolves not to waste anything, changing jobs to psychic and proceeding to lift the carcasses with his mind. He will bring them all back to the village, since though he could butcher them himself by becoming a hunter, he feels like he has done enough for the day, and will leave it to the villagers instead. With this, he resumes his march, with the carcasses floating eerily in tow. Back at the village, one villager runs, screaming that they've got trouble. Hearing that a monster is heading their way, Zozo asks if it is silver wolves, fearing that the worst has happened to Tsukasa. But as the village begins to panic, the man tells him it is a gigantic monster unlike any they've seen before. At that precise moment, a huge mound of fur makes its way through the woods, into the clearing outside of the village, causing everyone to scream in terror. To the guards' surprise, they seem to hear muffled voices from within the creature, so Zozo approaches it and pushes some of the fur aside, coming face to face with an annoyed Tsukasa and fleeing in panic. The young man is exhausted, having had trouble reining in the 11 floating carcasses all the way back to the village. Zozo asks in terror what those things are, shocked to see silver wolves floating around, and the job changer explains that they do so because of a psychic spell, realizing that seeing spells at work must be a rare thing in this remote place. Lining up the wolves, he explains he brought them back there thinking there might be some use for them, and Zozo finds his skill to be quite handy. When Esta arrives, Tsukasa hands him the bag of fangs as proof of his hunt, telling the chief he brought back fangs from 11 wolves but defeated 13. He searched the area just in case there were more, but finding none, he believes he has broken up their pack. The whole village erupts in celebration at this news, and the surprised Tsukasa notes they were probably anxious about the wolf threat, being a village without any fighters. Since he was also able to increase his level and knowledge quite a bit, the young man considers this to be a very productive day. His thoughts are cut short when Zozo eagerly slaps his back and shakes him around, thanking him for what he has done, despite him insisting he was just doing his job. Esta then approaches, telling him they owe him their lives and bowing in gratitude. Tsukasa is surprised at this. Having exchanged his services for a reward, he didn't expect to be thanked so much. This brings back memories of when he landed a big contract with a company, only for his coworkers to mock him and speak ill of him behind his back. Back then, it was all about jealousy and undercutting each other, and that was normal for him. Unable to stand the cheery atmosphere any longer, he decides to change it, and asks the villagers if they could handle the butchering of the wolves. This has the intended effect, as Zozo and the strongest men in town step forward and accept the task, immediately getting to it and changing the atmosphere in a second. As the butchering gets underway, Esta asks Tsukasa what he will do with the materials he gets from the butchering, and though the young man intends to sell the fur, he gifts the meat to the villagers. The village chief is extremely grateful for this, since fresh meat is a rare treat for them, and soon enough the whole village is bustling with activity as a feast is prepared. A large cauldron is placed over the fire, and everyone is told to bring whatever they can contribute from home. It is also called for the alcohol to be brought out, since that night they can drink, finally, without worry. Seeing all this activity while sitting on a porch, Tsukasa notes to himself that this has turned into quite a celebration, before collapsing to one side. Esta approaches him with concern, but the young man reassures him he just needs a break, and asks if he could stay over, which the village chief immediately allows. He leads the young man to his own house, and after removing his adventurer's outfit, Tsukasa plunges onto a bed, ready to rest for the first time since he arrived at this world. He is off to a good start, and plans to use the village as a base to hunt down monsters, level up, and to learn more about this world he knows so little about. Tsukasa wakes up, his eyes slowly adjusting to the brightness. He is surprised to see light coming out of the window, expecting it would be nighttime by now. Thinking he took a nap amidst the villagers' commotion, he wonders if it is possible there is no nighttime in this world. He is pulled from his thoughts by Esta knocking on the door and asking if he's awake. Dressing up quickly, he opens the door, and the old man tells him he didn't want to wake him earlier since he was sleeping so soundly, which wasn't surprising after the young man's battle with the Silver Wolf pack. Kindly, the man offers him breakfast, removing a cloth to reveal a wooden tray containing freshly baked bread and a milk stew with meat and vegetables. Not having eaten anything since noon the previous day, Tsukasa thanks him and accepts the offer, eagerly digging in. Carefully blowing on the spoon, he takes the first mouthful, finding that the milk's mild sweetness blends perfectly with the vegetables, detecting chunks of carrots and potatoes, and feeling his stomach filling up. Scooping up a chunk of meat, He wonders if it comes from the silver wolves he slew. As he chews on it, he feels the beef-like taste seeps out, freed from its milky scent, and finds it hard to imagine its taste from the creature's terrifying appearance. The bread seems to dry out all the moisture in his mouth, and is perfect for soaking up the stew, creating a delicious combination. The taste is simple, but it is exactly what he needed. As he eats, he feels the presence of someone from his past, watching over his shoulder. But when he turns, he sees no one there. Now full, Tsukasa thanks Esta's wife for the meal, and the chief then leads him to another room to give him his reward for defeating the silver wolves. Opening the purse, the young man lays its contents on the table between them and counts 13 silver coins. But he has no idea how much they're worth, having no idea of that world's currency system. He excuses himself, stating that he is not familiar with the value of money after being secluded in the mountains for a long time, and as such asks the chief to give him a brief explanation. Understanding his circumstances, Esta obliges, and explains that he would use a few silver coins if he wanted to buy a snack that somewhat fills him up, though Tsukasa remains just as confused as before. After asking a few more questions, he decided to convert the currency in his mind with a certain exchange rate. Iron coins are worth 10 yen, copper ones 100 yen, silver coins 1,000 yen, gold coins 10,000 yen, and finally big gold coins are worth 1 million yen. At this rate, Tsukasa's entire fortune is 13,000 yen, and the young man concludes he should aim for big gold coins. Esta explains that the Adventurers Guild sets the bounty for a silver wolf at 1 silver coin each, and though prices may vary regionally, they adhere to the standard rate. Tsukasa takes note of this, and the village chief notes that lying or haggling over the price could lead to the village getting a bad rep, leading to travelers and adventurers not accepting their quests. The job changer ponders on this, realizing that if that were to happen, then nobody would come to their aid anymore, making it a matter of life or death for them. Otherwise, the village could have taken advantage of someone ignorant of the standard rate like himself. The village chief then hands Tsukasa the payment for the 11 wolf pelts he brought, and after counting it, the young man realizes they are more than 50 copper coins. Esta tells him the price would normally be 8 copper coins per pelt, but they adjusted the price due to the battle damage they suffered. Tsukasa reassures the old man, telling him that he hadn't considered the material. Had he still been working in Japan, he may have haggled over the price, but Esta is his first interaction since coming to this world, and though money is important, he doesn't want to strain their relationship. With some uneasiness, the village chief proceeds to make a further request of his guest. He reveals that some villagers were injured by the silver wolves and are in need of medicine, but they're short on dozal herb needed for the concoction. Tsukasa immediately realizes those were the herbs he picked up the other day in the woods. He muses that he could heal the wounded by switching profession to a priest, but fears that might be seen as encroaching on gratitude. Since they want medicine, he chooses to do things their way, and hands the village chief the dozal he collected. The old man is surprised that Tsukasa even managed to gather herbs while hunting, noting that he leaves nothing to be desired, while the young man tries to play it down. Esta then heads for the door, suggesting they take the herbs to the apothecary right away. Tsukasa is surprised to hear of another job holder in the village, but the older man is quick to clarify the woman is not an apothecary by profession. The job changer is somewhat disappointed by this, having hoped to get more information from the apothecary. Esta knocks on the door of a house, and a small old lady supported by a knotty cane answers, slamming the door open and stating in a scolding tone that she can't make medicine without dozal herb. Tsukasa is dumbfounded by the old lady's brusque statement, but Esta addresses her as Gerda, and reveals that they do have the herb, to which she grumpily replies that he should have started with that, telling them to come inside. Crossing her threshold, the young man is immediately assailed by a multitude of scents coming from the varied herbs being stored there. Beckoning him with her finger, Gerda demands that Tsukasa hand her the herbs, which he hurries to do. Examining them, the old crone confirms they are indeed dozal herbs, and she can use them to make medicine for the injured, adding that she would have torn a new one on the young man if he had mistakenly brought sudozal. Raising his hand like he was in school, Tsukasa asks the old lady if she can make medicine even without the apothecary job. Gerda responds by angrily pointing her walking stick at him, shouting that anyone with the knowledge and skill required can make medicine, just like one does not need to be a chef to cook. Recognizing she has a good point, the young man wonders what's the difference between having a job and not having one, asking what the benefits are of having the apothecary job. Though Gerda blurts out that she doesn't know much about it, she goes on to explain that it comes naturally, allowing the job holder to know how to make and efficiently gather and mix ingredients. Tsukasa then comes to the conclusion that in this world, A job greatly enhances and optimizes knowledge, as well as actions related to it. Thanking Gerda, he turns to leave, but the old lady insists that he stay to help, since she needs a man's help to make the medicine. And Esta ditches him there without a second thought. Soon enough, Tsukasa is groaning and gritting his teeth from the effort of grinding the herbs with a mortar and pestle. Once he is done, he presents the mix to the old lady, who somewhat approves it and then hands him another mortar with fresh herbs inside for him to grind, much to his annoyance. He thought they only needed dosal herbs, so he doesn't understand why he's doing unrelated tasks. As he furiously grinds the new herbs, he laments that all he is doing is hard work, instead of discovering how medicine is made. The woman then tells him to use a millstone once he is done, yelling at him to keep at it. Exhausted, Tsukasa decides to change things up a little and see how much a job can improve efficiency. Activating the apothecary profession and catching Gerda's attention, he can now understand the role of each herb, not to mention that he can use the apothecary's tools with extreme ease. The old lady notes with some suspicion he has gotten better all of a sudden, but Tsukasa is mesmerized by his new skills, since he now understands how to use his body to better suit the workflow. He enthusiastically asks Gerda if they're going to dry some herbs, offering to dry them quickly and proceeding to use the unique magical skills privy to only apothecaries to dry the herbs with magic, handing them over to her with a smile. Not buying into it, Gerda stares at him sternly, recalling he said he was a sorcerer, and noting that sorcerers don't have a spell to dry the herbs instantly. His smile gone, Tsukasa feels overwhelmed by the tense atmosphere, and frantically reveals that his main job is a job changer, which allowed him to switch from sorcerer to apothecary. Gerda is shocked to hear this, and when the young man asks if it is that unusual, she furiously states of course it is, noting that he